Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling completely invisible? Like your words didn't matter at all? Like people just smiled politely, nodded, and then moved on as if you never spoke? That hollow feeling in your chest when you realize your opinion was dismissed, your suggestion ignored, your presence overlooked. It's one of the most painful experiences we face as human beings. The feeling of being powerless in our own lives. Maybe it happened in a meeting where you presented an idea, only to watch someone else present the exact same concept 10 minutes later and receive applause. Maybe it was asking for a raise and feeling small when your boss barely looked up from their computer. Maybe it was trying to convince a friend to choose a different path, watching helplessly as they made a decision you knew would hurt them. Or maybe it's something as simple as walking into a room and feeling like you disappear into the background while others naturally command attention and respect. You've watched it happen over and over. There are people who seem to effortlessly get what they want. They don't shout, they don't demand, they don't manipulate or threaten. They simply speak, and others listen. They suggest, and others agree. They enter a room, and the energy shifts toward them. What do they know that you don't? What invisible power do they possess? Here's what they understand that you were never taught. Influence isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's not about having the best argument or the most facts. It's not about manipulation, tricks, or forcing people to do what you want. True persuasion, the kind that creates lasting change and genuine connection, happens in the quiet spaces between words. It lives in the pause before you speak, in the way you hold your body, in how deeply you listen, and most importantly, in who you become as a person. The truth is, every single day of your life, you are already influencing people. The only question is whether you're doing it intentionally or accidentally. Whether you're getting the results you want or settling for whatever happens to you. Whether you're shaping your world or letting your world shape you. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about unlocking the power you already possess but have never been taught to use. This is about understanding the invisible forces that drive human behavior, the psychological triggers that determine whether someone says yes or no, and the ancient principles that have guided every great leader, negotiator, and communicator throughout history. By the end of this journey, you won't need to beg anyone for anything. You won't need to argue, convince, or prove your worth. You'll become the kind of person that others naturally want to say yes to. The kind of person who walks into a room and immediately earns respect and attention. The kind of person who suggests an idea and watches others embrace it as their own. You'll discover that true power doesn't come from controlling others, but from understanding them so deeply that influence becomes effortless. You're about to learn the quiet power of persuasion. And once you understand it, your relationships, your career, your entire life will never be the same. Chapter 1: The Psychology of Yes. Every yes you've ever received started in someone else's mind long before they spoke the word. Every no began the same way. If you want to understand persuasion, you must first understand the invisible forces that determine these decisions. The human brain is not a logical machine carefully weighing facts and evidence. It's an emotional creature driven by ancient survival instincts, desperate for safety, connection, and belonging. When someone says yes to you, they're not really saying yes to your idea, your request, or your proposal. They're saying yes to how that idea makes them feel about themselves. They're saying yes because, in that moment, agreeing with you serves their deepest psychological needs. Understanding these needs is the foundation of all influence. The first need is safety. Before humans can consider what you're asking, their brain must determine whether you pose a threat. This happens in milliseconds, far below conscious awareness. Your tone of voice, your posture, your facial expression, even your breathing pattern all signal whether you're safe to trust. If their subconscious brain detects any hint of aggression, manipulation, or desperation, every defense mechanism activates. Your words become irrelevant because their nervous system has already decided you're dangerous. The second need is connection. Humans are tribal creatures. We survived as a species not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we learned to cooperate. We're hardwired to seek belonging, to find our tribe, to identify who is like us and who is different. When someone feels deeply understood by you, when they sense that you truly see them, their brain releases chemicals that create trust and bonding. They begin to view you as part of their tribe, which means your success becomes connected to their success. The third need is self-interest. This doesn't mean people are selfish, although they can be. It means that every decision humans make is filtered through the question, how does this benefit me or the people I care about? Even acts of pure generosity serve our psychological need to see ourselves as good people. The most powerful persuasion happens when you can show someone how saying yes to you aligns with their own values, goals, and interests. Let me tell you about Marcus, a quiet 12-year-old who understood these principles instinctively. His class was voting on where to go for their end-of-year trip. Half the kids wanted an amusement park, half wanted a science museum. The debate was getting heated, with kids arguing loudly about which option was better. Marcus raised his hand and said something that changed everything. "I was thinking," he said quietly, "what if we're looking at this wrong? We all want to have fun and learn something cool we can talk about later. The amusement park has those physics demonstrations where you can see how roller coasters work. And the science museum has that virtual reality section that feels like riding a spaceship. Either place could give us both things if we pay attention to the right parts." He didn't argue for one side or the other. Instead, he reframed the entire conversation. He showed both groups how their real needs, not their stated positions, could be met either way. He made them feel understood and intelligent. Within minutes, the class unanimously chose the Science Museum, not because Marcus convinced them, but because he helped them convince themselves. This is how the psychology of yes really works. People don't change their minds because you present better arguments. They change their minds when you help them discover that what they really want is actually aligned with what you're suggesting. Marcus understood intuitively what researchers like Robert Cialdini have spent decades proving. Humans make decisions based on psychological triggers that operate below conscious awareness. These triggers include authority, the tendency to follow those who seem competent and knowledgeable; scarcity, the increased value we place on things that seem rare or limited; reciprocity, the overwhelming urge to return favors and kindness; consistency, our need to align our actions with our stated beliefs and past commitments; social proof, the powerful influence of what others like us are doing; and liking, the simple fact that we're more likely to say yes to people we find attractive, similar to us, or genuinely likable. But here's what most people miss. These principles only work when they emerge naturally from who you are, not when you try to manufacture them. The moment people sense you're using techniques on them, their defenses activate and your influence disappears. True persuasion isn't about pushing the right psychological buttons. It's about becoming the kind of person whose natural presence activates these principles automatically. The most persuasive people you know aren't following a script or manipulating others. They've simply learned to align their communication with how the human brain actually works. They speak to emotions first and logic second. They seek to understand before being understood. They make people feel safe, valued, and intelligent. They present their ideas in ways that serve others' interests, not just their own. This is the foundation everything else builds upon. Every technique, every strategy, every word choice must serve these deeper psychological needs. When you truly understand the psychology of yes, persuasion stops being something you do to people and becomes something you do with them. It stops being about getting what you want and starts being about creating outcomes that serve everyone involved. The power to influence others has always been inside you. Now you're beginning to understand how it works. Chapter 2. The Quiet Charisma Formula. True charisma has nothing to do with being loud, flashy, or the center of attention. The most magnetically persuasive people you'll ever meet often speak the least in any conversation. They possess something far more powerful than volume or entertainment value. They radiate a quality that draws people in like a magnet, makes others hang on their every word, and creates an almost hypnotic sense of trust and connection. This quality is quiet charisma, and it operates on three fundamental pillars: presence, warmth, and certainty. When these three elements combine, they create an energy that transmits more powerfully than any words you could ever speak. People feel this energy before you say a single word, and it determines whether they're open to your influence or resistant to it. Presence is the foundation. It's the quality of being completely here, completely focused on this moment and this person. In our distracted world, true presence has become incredibly rare and therefore incredibly valuable. When someone experiences your full attention, when they feel that nothing else in the world matters to you in that moment except understanding them, something profound happens in their nervous system. They relax. They open up. They begin to trust. Most people mistake presence for intensity. They think it means staring deeply into someone's eyes or speaking with dramatic gravitas. Real presence is actually much quieter. It's in the way you turn your body fully towards someone when they speak. It's in how you let their words land before responding. It's in the quality of silence you create that allows others to think and feel without being rushed or judged. Warmth is often misunderstood as being nice or agreeable. True warmth is much deeper than politeness. It's a genuine sense of goodwill toward others, a fundamental belief that people are doing their best with what they have. Warmth doesn't mean accepting bad behavior or agreeing with everything. It means approaching others with curiosity rather than judgment, seeking to understand rather than to prove yourself right. People can sense warmth in your voice, in your facial expressions, in the way you hold your body. It's in the slight smile that touches your eyes when someone walks into the room. It's in the way you ask questions that show genuine interest rather than just waiting for your turn to speak. It's in how you make people feel safe to be themselves around you, mistakes and all. Certainty is perhaps the most misunderstood element. It's not arrogance or stubbornness. It's not about having all the answers or never changing your mind. True certainty is a deep inner knowing that you can handle whatever comes up. It's confidence in your ability to figure things out, to adapt, to remain centered regardless of external circumstances. When you possess genuine certainty, it shows in your posture, your breathing, your pace of speech. You don't rush to fill silences because you're comfortable with them. You don't need to prove yourself because you know your worth. You can admit when you don't know something because your value isn't tied to being perfect. This kind of certainty is deeply attractive because it makes others feel safe and stable around you. Consider Sarah, a software engineer who transformed her career not by becoming more technical, but by developing quiet charisma. She noticed that in meetings, the loudest voices always dominated, but their ideas weren't necessarily the best. So she began experimenting with a different approach. Instead of jumping into debates, she would listen completely to what others were saying. She would ask thoughtful questions that helped people think more clearly about their own ideas. When she finally spoke, her words carried unusual weight because everyone knew she had been truly paying attention. Her suggestions often became the team's final decisions, not because she argued for them, but because she presented them in a way that felt collaborative rather than competitive. Sarah discovered that emotional intelligence combined with careful observation creates genuine power. She learned to read the room, to notice who was frustrated, who was excited, who needed to be heard. She became skilled at acknowledging people's contributions before adding her own perspective. She developed the ability to remain calm and centered even when discussions became heated. The practical elements of quiet charisma can be developed with consistent practice. Your posture should be open and relaxed, never closed or defensive. Your tone should be measured and intentional, avoiding the ups and downs of nervous energy. You should mirror the communication style of others subtly, matching their pace and energy level. Using people's names throughout conversations creates instant connection and shows respect. Eye contact becomes a tool of connection rather than dominance when done correctly. Instead of staring, you offer your gaze as a gift, looking at people when they speak and occasionally looking away to give them space to think. Your eyes should convey interest and warmth, not intensity or judgment. The most powerful quote about influence comes from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is the essence of quiet charisma. It's not about impressing people with your intelligence or accomplishments. It's about creating an experience of being truly seen, heard, and valued. When you master these three elements, presence, warmth, and certainty, something remarkable happens. Your influence becomes effortless. People seek out your opinion. They trust your judgment. They feel better about themselves after spending time with you. You don't need to convince anyone of anything because your very being makes your ideas more compelling. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about removing the barriers that prevent your natural charisma from shining through. Most people suppress their presence by being distracted, hide their warmth behind defenses, and undermine their certainty with self-doubt. Quiet charisma is simply what emerges when you let go of these limitations and show up as your most centered, connected self. The world is desperately hungry for this kind of authentic power. In an age of artificial everything, genuine presence, warmth, and certainty stand out like a beacon. When you develop quiet charisma, you don't just become more persuasive. You become someone who makes the world a little bit better simply by being in it. Chapter 3. Become a mirror. The power of deep listening. The greatest gift you can give another human being isn't advice, solutions, or your own wisdom. It's the experience of being deeply heard and understood. In a world where everyone is competing to speak, where conversations have become dueling monologues, the person who truly listens possesses an almost magical power to influence and connect. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. While someone is speaking, they're busy formulating their response, judging what they're hearing, or waiting for a pause so they can share their own story. This isn't listening at all. It's preparation for talking, and people can feel the difference. True listening is an act of presence that transforms both the listener and the speaker. When someone feels genuinely heard, their entire nervous system relaxes. Their defenses come down. They begin to trust you with deeper parts of themselves. They start to see you not as an opponent to convince or a judge to impress, but as an ally who truly cares about their experience. Deep listening operates on multiple levels simultaneously. You're hearing the words being spoken, but you're also paying attention to what's not being said. You're noticing the emotions beneath the content, the fears behind the complaints, the hopes hidden in the problems. You're observing body language, tone of voice, energy levels, and the spaces between words where the real truth often lives. Let me share the story of Dr. Elizabeth Chun, a therapist who rarely spoke during sessions, but was renowned for creating profound breakthroughs in her clients. Other therapists would observe her work, looking for techniques or interventions they could replicate. What they found confused them. Elizabeth didn't use complex therapeutic methods or clever insights. She simply listened with a quality of attention that most people had never experienced. When a client spoke, Elizabeth gave them the gift of her complete presence. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer quick fixes, didn't rush to fill uncomfortable silences. She reflected back what she heard, both the content and the emotion, in a way that helped people feel truly seen. Her clients often said they discovered things about themselves they had never realized before, not because Elizabeth told them anything new, but because her listening created space for their own wisdom to emerge. The power of this approach lies in a fundamental truth about human nature. People persuade themselves far more effectively than anyone else could ever persuade them. When you listen deeply enough, you help others hear their own thoughts clearly. You become a mirror that reflects their ideas back to them in a way that allows them to see new possibilities and insights. Active listening begins with intention. Before entering any conversation, you must genuinely want to understand the other person's perspective. This isn't a technique you can fake. People sense authenticity at a cellular level. If you're listening strategically, trying to find openings to insert your own agenda, your influence will backfire. Deep listening requires temporarily setting aside your own needs and fully entering someone else's world. The first skill is paraphrasing, but not in the mechanical way most people think. Effective paraphrasing doesn't just repeat back what someone said. It captures the essence of their message and reflects it back in slightly different words, proving you understood not just the facts but the meaning behind them. Instead of saying, "So what I hear you saying is," try phrases like, "It sounds like what matters most to you is," or "What I'm understanding is that you feel." Validation is perhaps the most powerful tool in human communication, yet most people have never learned to use it correctly. Validation doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says. It means acknowledging that their feelings and perspectives make sense given their experience. Even when you disagree with someone's conclusions, you can validate their emotions and their right to see things differently. The strategic use of silence might be the most underestimated element of persuasive communication. Most people are uncomfortable with quiet moments and rush to fill them with words. This is a missed opportunity. Intentional pauses give others space to think, to feel, to go deeper into their own experience. Some of the most profound moments in conversations happen in the spaces between words. When someone finishes speaking, count to 3 before responding. This simple pause accomplishes several things. It ensures they've completely finished their thought. It gives you time to truly process what they've shared. It makes them feel heard rather than rushed. And often, it encourages them to continue sharing, revealing information and emotions they might not have otherwise expressed. The technique of emotional labeling can create instant connection and trust. When you accurately identify and name what someone is feeling, they experience being understood at a deep level. Instead of jumping to solutions, try phrases like, "That sounds incredibly frustrating," or "I imagine that felt really disappointing," or "It seems like you're feeling torn between these options." Questions are another powerful tool, but only when they come from genuine curiosity rather than interrogation. The best questions open up new ways of thinking rather than demanding specific information. Ask things like, "What's most important to you about this situation?" Or "How would you know if this problem was solved?" Or "What would need to be different for you to feel good about this?" Perhaps the most advanced listening skill is hearing what someone needs, even when they can't articulate it themselves. Often, people who seem angry are actually feeling hurt. People who appear stubborn might be feeling unheard. People who seem demanding might be feeling powerless. When you listen for the need beneath the behavior, you can respond to what they actually want rather than what they're saying they want. This level of listening transforms you into someone people seek out when they need to process difficult decisions or emotions. They trust you with their problems because they know you won't judge, rush to fix, or make it about yourself. This trust becomes the foundation for all future influence. When someone knows you truly care about their well-being, they become naturally open to your suggestions and guidance. The paradox of deep listening is that the less you try to persuade, the more persuasive you become. When people feel completely heard and understood, they often arrive at the conclusions you were hoping they would reach, but they experience it as their own insight rather than your influence. This is the most ethical and effective form of persuasion possible. Deep listening isn't just a communication technique. It's a way of being with others that honors their humanity and creates space for genuine connection. In a world hungry for authentic understanding, the person who listens deeply becomes irresistible. Not because they're trying to be, but because they're offering something rare and precious, the gift of being truly seen and heard. Chapter 4. How to speak so people can't ignore you. The way you speak determines whether people lean in or tune out, whether your words land with impact or disappear into the noise of everyday conversation. Most people speak unconsciously, using filler words, apologetic language, and rambling sentences that dilute their message and undermine their authority. When you learn to speak with precision, intention, and rhythm, your words carry a weight that makes people stop what they're doing and pay attention. Powerful speech isn't about volume or speed. It's about the deliberate choice of words that paint vivid pictures in the listener's mind, the strategic use of pauses that create anticipation, and the confident delivery that signals your words deserve to be heard. Every element of your speech, from the pace to the pitch to the emotional undertone, is either building your influence or diminishing it. The foundation of compelling speech is precision. Every word should be chosen intentionally, like a master chef selecting ingredients for a perfect dish. Vague language creates vague results. When you say things like, "I think maybe we should probably consider possibly doing something about this situation," you're asking people to ignore you. Instead, learn to speak with clarity and conviction. I recommend we implement this solution by Friday. Eliminate weak language that undermines your credibility before you've even made your point. Stop saying, "I'm sorry, but," when you're not actually apologizing for anything. Replace, "I hope this makes sense," with confident statements that assume people are intelligent enough to follow your thinking. Change "this might be wrong, but," to "here's another perspective to consider." Power words are specific terms that trigger emotional responses and create immediate engagement. Words like discover, transform, breakthrough, secret, and proven capture attention because they promise value and insight. But power words only work when they're used sparingly and authentically. Overuse them, and you sound like a used car salesman. Storytelling is the most powerful tool for making your words unforgettable. The human brain is wired to remember stories far better than facts or abstract concepts. When you want to make a point, wrap it in a narrative that people can visualize and emotionally connect with. Instead of saying communication is important in relationships, tell the story of a couple who saved their marriage by learning to really hear each other. The structure of effective storytelling follows a simple pattern: context, conflict, resolution. Set the scene so people understand the situation. Introduce the problem or challenge that creates tension. Reveal how it was solved in a way that delivers your intended message. This structure keeps people engaged because their brains are constantly trying to predict how the story will end. Anchoring is a technique that helps people remember your key messages by connecting them to familiar concepts or experiences. If you want someone to understand a complex idea, anchor it to something they already know. This new process will work like GPS for your workflow. It will guide you step by step and recalculate when you hit obstacles. The rhythm and pacing of your speech create emotional effects that are often more important than the content itself. Fast speech can create excitement and urgency, but it can also make you seem nervous or untrustworthy. Slow speech can convey authority and thoughtfulness, but it can also bore people if overused. Master speakers vary their pace strategically, speeding up during exciting parts of a story, and slowing down when delivering key insights. Pauses are punctuation marks in spoken language, and most people don't use nearly enough of them. A well-timed pause before an important point creates anticipation. A pause after a key statement gives people time to absorb its significance. A pause in response to a question shows you're thinking carefully rather than just reacting. Silence, used strategically, can be more powerful than words. Vocal variety keeps people engaged by preventing the monotonous drone that makes minds wander. Change your pitch to emphasize important points. Adjust your volume to match your message. Quieter for intimate insights, louder for inspirational moments. Modify your tone to convey the appropriate emotion. Your voice is an instrument capable of incredible range and expression when you learn to use it consciously. Consider the transformation of Michael, a brilliant engineer whose ideas were constantly overlooked in meetings. He had valuable insights, but delivered them in a monotone voice filled with technical jargon and tentative qualifiers. After learning to speak powerfully, he began presenting his ideas as stories with clear benefits for the business. He eliminated apologetic language and started using strategic pauses to let his points land. Within 6 months, he was promoted to lead a team of engineers who had previously dismissed his contributions. The reframing technique allows you to take weak, apologetic language and transform it into confident, influential communication. Instead of, "I hate to bother you, but could you possibly maybe consider looking at this when you have time?" Try, "I have a solution that could save the company $50,000. When would be a good time to discuss it?" Instead of, "This probably won't work, but what if we tried?" Say, "Here's an approach that addresses all 3 concerns we've discussed." Instead of, "I'm not an expert, but I think." Try, "My experience suggests that." These small changes in language create massive changes in how others perceive your competence and authority. Emotional modulation means matching your energy and intensity to your message and your audience. If you're delivering bad news, your tone should be serious and empathetic. If you're sharing an exciting opportunity, let your genuine enthusiasm show. If you're teaching a complex concept, be patient and encouraging. People don't just hear your words, they feel your emotional state, and it influences how they receive your message. The most powerful speakers understand that communication is not about them, it's about the audience. Every word choice, every story, every pause should serve the goal of helping others understand, feel, and act. When you speak with this kind of intention and skill, people don't just listen to you. They seek out your perspective, remember your insights, and act on your suggestions. Learning to speak powerfully isn't about becoming someone else. It's about removing the habits and patterns that prevent your natural wisdom and insights from being heard. When you speak with precision, intention, and rhythm, you honor both your message and your audience. You become someone worth listening to, not because you demand attention, but because you've earned it through the quality of your communication. Chapter 5. Master the unspoken language, body, and energy. Your body is speaking long before you open your mouth, and people are making decisions about whether to trust, respect, and follow you based on signals you might not even realize you're sending. Research consistently shows that over 90% of communication happens non-verbally, through posture, facial expressions, gestures, energy, and 1,000 micro-expressions that occur below conscious awareness. Most people focus entirely on finding the right words while completely ignoring the fact that their body language is undermining every word they speak. You can say you're confident while slouching in your chair. You can claim to be interested while checking your phone. You can express enthusiasm while speaking in a monotone voice. When your verbal and nonverbal messages contradict each other, people believe your body, not your words. Understanding nonverbal communication begins with recognizing that your internal state directly affects your external presence. Confidence isn't something you can fake by standing up straight and making eye contact. Real confidence comes from inner certainty, and it shows up in hundreds of subtle ways that people feel rather than consciously observe. Your breathing changes when you're truly confident. Your posture naturally opens. Your gestures become more purposeful and less defensive. The foundation of powerful body language is what researchers call alpha calm, the relaxed, centered presence of someone who feels secure and in control without needing to prove it. This isn't the aggressive dominance often mistaken for leadership. It's the quiet strength of someone who can handle whatever situation arises. Think of the difference between a nervous chihuahua yapping for attention and a confident lion calmly observing its surroundings. Open posture signals safety and trustworthiness to others' subconscious minds. When you cross your arms, turn your body away, or create physical barriers between yourself and others, you're unconsciously communicating defensiveness or discomfort. Open posture means facing people directly, keeping your arms uncrossed, maintaining an upright but relaxed stance, and creating physical space that feels welcoming rather than threatening. The power of leaning in cannot be overstated. When someone is speaking and you lean slightly toward them, you're non-verbally communicating interest and engagement. This simple gesture makes people feel heard and valued, which increases their openness to your influence. Conversely, leaning back or away signals disinterest or disagreement, even if that's not your intention. Movement should be purposeful rather than nervous or excessive. Fidgeting, tapping, swaying, or repetitive gestures distract from your message and make you appear anxious or untrustworthy. Slow, deliberate movement conveys authority and thoughtfulness. When you gesture, make your movements clear and intentional. When you walk, do so with purpose and direction. Eye contact is perhaps the most complex element of nonverbal communication. Too little makes you seem shifty or disinterested. Too much feels aggressive or invasive. The key is to offer your gaze as a gift rather than using it as a weapon. Look at people when they're speaking to show you're listening. Make eye contact when delivering important points to ensure they land. Look away occasionally to give others space to think and process. Your handshake, though it lasts only seconds, communicates volumes about your character and confidence. A firm handshake with appropriate eye contact signals strength and trustworthiness. A weak handshake suggests uncertainty or disinterest. An overly strong handshake can come across as aggressive or compensatory. Practice until you can deliver a handshake that feels warm, confident, and appropriate to the situation. Energy calibration is the advanced skill of reading a room and adjusting your presence to match what the situation requires. Sometimes you need to bring high energy to motivate and inspire. Sometimes you need to dial down your intensity to make others feel comfortable. Sometimes you need to project calm stability in the midst of chaos. The most influential people can sense what energy is needed and provide it naturally. Consider the case of Jennifer, a marketing director who struggled to get buy-in for her innovative campaigns. She had brilliant ideas and could articulate them clearly, but something wasn't working. Through feedback, she realized her body language was sabotaging her presentations. She would hunch over her notes, avoid eye contact when making key points, and use small, tentative gestures that made her seem uncertain about her own ideas. Jennifer began practicing what she called embodied confidence. She learned to stand tall and take up appropriate space. She made eye contact while delivering her key insights. She used broader, more purposeful gestures that helped illustrate her concepts. Most importantly, she worked on her internal state, building genuine confidence in her ideas through thorough preparation and positive visualization. Within a month, her approval rate for new campaigns increased dramatically, not because her ideas improved, but because her presence finally matched the quality of her thinking. The concept of mirroring is crucial for building rapport and connection. Humans are naturally inclined to like and trust people who are similar to them. When you subtly match someone's posture, energy level, and communication style, you trigger this subconscious preference. If they speak quietly, you lower your volume. If they're energetic, you increase your engagement. If they're more formal, you adjust your approach accordingly. This isn't mimicry. It's respectful adaptation that makes others feel more comfortable and understood. Breathing affects every aspect of your nonverbal communication. When you're nervous or stressed, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which triggers fight or flight responses in both you and others around you. Deep, calm breathing signals to everyone's nervous system that the situation is safe and under control. Before important conversations or presentations, take several deep breaths to center yourself and project the calm confidence that makes others want to follow your lead. Your facial expressions should match your message and feel genuine. A smile that doesn't reach your eyes looks fake and manipulative. Concern that seems manufactured appears patronizing. The key is to actually feel the appropriate emotion, which will naturally create authentic expressions. If you want to appear interested, become genuinely curious. If you want to seem confident, focus on what you know rather than what you don't know. The space you occupy and how you occupy it sends powerful messages about your status and competence. Taking up too little space makes you seem insignificant. Taking up too much space can appear arrogant or inconsiderate. Find the balance that feels natural and appropriate, present and engaged without being overwhelming or invisible. Personal grooming and appearance, while not technically body language, are part of the nonverbal message you send. You don't need to be conventionally attractive or expensively dressed, but you do need to show that you respect yourself and others enough to present yourself well. This includes basic hygiene, appropriate attire for the situation, and attention to details that show you care about how you show up in the world. Mastering nonverbal communication isn't about manipulating others or projecting a false image. It's about ensuring that your external presence accurately reflects your internal worth and competence. When your body language aligns with your message and your authentic self, you become naturally magnetic. People are drawn to the consistency and integrity they sense in you, even if they can't articulate exactly what makes you so compelling. The goal isn't perfection, it's alignment. When your thoughts, feelings, words, and body are all sending the same message, you become incredibly powerful. Not because you're trying to influence others, but because you're fully integrated and authentic. This kind of presence is rare and valuable, and it creates the foundation for all ethical influence and meaningful connection. Chapter 6: The 3 Triggers of Instant Trust. Trust is the invisible currency that determines whether people will follow your lead, accept your ideas, or open their hearts to your influence. Without trust, even the most logical arguments fall on deaf ears. With trust, simple suggestions become powerful catalysts for change. The ability to build trust quickly and authentically is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop as a human being. Trust operates on 3 fundamental levels that must all be satisfied before someone will truly open themselves to your influence. These are competence, warmth, and authenticity. When people sense all 3 qualities in you, trust forms almost instantly. When any one of these elements is missing or feels manufactured, trust remains elusive no matter how hard you try to earn it. Competence is the belief that you know what you're talking about and can deliver on what you promise. This doesn't mean you need to be an expert in everything, but it does mean you need to demonstrate expertise in the areas where you're seeking to influence others. Competence shows up in how well you understand the situation, how thoughtfully you ask questions, how clearly you explain concepts, and how realistic your promises are. But competence alone isn't enough. History is filled with highly competent people who lacked influence because others didn't trust their motives. Warmth is the second essential element. The belief that you genuinely care about others' well-being and aren't just trying to serve your own interests. Warmth shows up in how you listen, how you respond to others' concerns, how you celebrate their successes, and how you handle their mistakes or failures. Authenticity is the third pillar, the sense that you're genuine and consistent, that what people see is who you really are. Authenticity means your words match your actions, your public persona aligns with your private character, and you're willing to be vulnerable and admit when you don't know something. People can sense authenticity at a cellular level, and nothing destroys trust faster than detecting that someone is putting on an act. Let me tell you about David, a quiet manager who transformed his struggling team without ever raising his voice or making demands. When David inherited the team, morale was low, productivity was declining, and people were actively looking for other jobs. Previous managers had tried motivation tactics, performance improvement plans, and even bringing in expensive consultants. Nothing worked because the fundamental problem was trust. David began by demonstrating competence in small, observable ways. He learned everyone's names and roles within his first week. He studied the team's challenges thoroughly before proposing any solutions. When asked questions, he either knew the answer or honestly admitted he didn't and committed to finding out. He never promised anything he couldn't deliver, and he always delivered what he promised. But David's real breakthrough came through warmth. He started having brief one-on-one conversations with team members, not about work performance, but about their goals, challenges, and what mattered to them professionally. He listened without judgment and looked for ways to support their aspirations. When someone made a mistake, he focused on learning and improvement rather than blame. When someone succeeded, he made sure they received recognition. Most importantly, David was authentic. He admitted when he was wrong. He shared appropriate stories about his own struggles and failures. He showed genuine emotion when discussing the team's challenges and victories. People began to see him not as a boss trying to extract performance, but as a person who genuinely cared about their success and well-being. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months, the team went from the worst performing group in the company to one of the most productive and innovative. People stopped looking for other jobs and started referring qualified friends for open positions. The change happened not because David implemented new systems or processes, but because he built trust that made people want to give their best effort. Building competence begins with thorough preparation and continuous learning. Before entering any situation where you need to influence others, study the context, understand the challenges, and think through potential solutions. Ask intelligent questions that demonstrate your grasp of the complexity involved. Admit the limits of your knowledge while showing confidence in your ability to figure things out or find the right resources. Share relevant experience and expertise, but do so through stories and examples rather than boastful claims. Instead of saying, "I'm really good at problem solving," tell a story about a specific problem you solved and how you approached it. Instead of claiming to be an expert, demonstrate your knowledge through insightful observations and helpful suggestions. Developing genuine warmth requires shifting your focus from getting what you want to understanding what others need. Practice seeing situations from other people's perspectives. Look for ways to serve their interests, not just your own. Celebrate their successes genuinely and help them learn from their failures without judgment. Show interest in them as whole human beings, not just as resources to accomplish your goals. Warmth also shows up in small gestures and moments of consideration. Remembering personal details people share with you. Checking in on how they're doing during difficult times. Offering help without being asked. Expressing genuine appreciation for their contributions. These actions create emotional deposits in your relationship account that build trust over time. Authenticity is perhaps the most challenging element because it requires genuine self-awareness and the courage to be vulnerable. Start by aligning your actions with your stated values. If you say you care about honesty, be honest even when it's uncomfortable. If you claim to value teamwork, actually collaborate instead of just directing. If you express concern for others' well-being, follow through with actions that support that concern. Share appropriate personal stories that reveal your humanity. Talk about mistakes you've made and what you learned from them. Admit when you're feeling uncertain or struggling with a decision. Show appropriate emotion when discussing things that matter to you. This doesn't mean oversharing or making conversations about yourself, but it does mean letting others see that you're a real person with real experiences and feelings. The story technique is particularly powerful for building all three elements of trust simultaneously. When you share a relevant story about a challenge you faced, how you addressed it, and what you learned, you demonstrate competence through your experience, warmth through your vulnerability, and authenticity through your willingness to be real about your struggles and growth. Building instant trust isn't about manipulation or technique. It's about becoming someone worthy of trust by actually possessing competence, warmth, and authenticity. When you develop these qualities genuinely, trust forms naturally because people sense your integrity and goodwill. They feel safe being influenced by you because they believe you have their best interests at heart and the ability to help them achieve their goals. Trust is the foundation that makes all other influence possible. When people trust you, they're open to your ideas, receptive to your feedback, and willing to take action based on your suggestions. Without trust, even the most sophisticated persuasion techniques feel manipulative and create resistance. With trust, simple conversations become powerful catalysts for positive change. The most influential people you know aren't necessarily the smartest, most charismatic, or most talented. They're the ones people trust most completely. They've earned that trust by consistently demonstrating competence, warmth, and authenticity over time. When you develop these same qualities, you don't just become more persuasive. You become someone who makes others' lives better simply by being in them. Chapter 7: Subtle Influence: Planting Ideas in Their Mind. The most powerful form of persuasion happens when people believe the idea was theirs all along. When you can guide someone to a conclusion without them feeling pushed, directed, or manipulated, you've mastered the art of subtle influence. This isn't about trickery or deception. It's about understanding how the human mind naturally processes information and presenting your ideas in a way that allows others to discover them organically. The key to subtle influence lies in recognizing that people are far more committed to ideas they feel they've discovered themselves than to concepts others have tried to convince them to accept. When someone feels like an idea was forced upon them, their natural psychological reactance kicks in, causing them to resist even good suggestions. But when they feel like they've arrived at an insight through their own thinking, they defend that idea as if it were their own child. This principle works because of how our brains are wired for learning and discovery. We're pattern recognition machines constantly trying to make sense of new information by connecting it to what we already know and believe. When you present ideas in a way that allows people to connect the dots themselves, they experience the satisfaction of insight and take ownership of the conclusion. The question technique is one of the most powerful tools for planting ideas subtly. Instead of stating your conclusion directly, you ask questions that guide people toward discovering that conclusion themselves. Rather than saying, "You should invest in better training for your team," you might ask, "What do you think would happen if your team had even stronger skills in this area?" Or have you ever noticed a connection between employee development and customer satisfaction? These questions work because they engage people's curiosity and problem-solving instincts. Their brains naturally start working to answer the question, and in doing so, they often arrive at the very conclusion you were hoping they would reach. The beautiful thing is that they experience it as their own insight rather than your suggestion. The pacing technique involves starting with statements or observations that people already agree with, then gradually leading them toward new conclusions. You begin with obvious truths that build credibility and rapport, then slowly introduce ideas that might initially seem foreign. You probably already know that customer retention is more cost-effective than customer acquisition, and you've likely noticed that customers who feel valued tend to stay longer. I'm curious what you think would happen if we made every customer interaction feel more personal and meaningful. This approach works because it activates the psychological principle of consistency. Once people agree with your initial statements, they're psychologically inclined to agree with subsequent statements that follow logically from the first ones. You're not arguing with them. You're building on what they already believe. Consider the story of Maria, a product manager who needed to convince her engineering team to prioritize a feature that would improve user experience but wasn't technically exciting. Instead of presenting PowerPoint slides about user research and business metrics, Maria tried a different approach. She began by asking the engineers about their own experiences as users of software products. What frustrated them most? What made them love certain applications? What would make them recommend a product to friends? Through this conversation, the team naturally identified all the user experience principles that Maria's proposed feature would address. Then Maria asked a simple question. If we were users of our own product, what would we want most? The engineers, now thinking from a user perspective rather than a technical one, began suggesting improvements that were remarkably similar to the feature Maria had originally wanted to propose. Within an hour, they were enthusiastically planning the implementation of what they now saw as their own idea. Analogies and metaphors are particularly powerful for subtle influence because they allow people to understand new concepts through familiar experiences. Instead of explaining why a business process needs to change, you might compare it to something everyone understands. Our current system is like trying to navigate a city with a map from 1985. It might eventually get you where you're going, but you'll miss all the new roads that could make the journey faster and more efficient. The analogy doesn't argue directly for change, but it helps people visualize the problem in a way that makes the solution seem obvious. They're not resisting your business proposal. They're agreeing that outdated maps are inefficient. Storytelling serves subtle influence by embedding your message within a narrative that doesn't feel like persuasion. Instead of lecturing someone about the importance of taking risks, you might tell a story about someone who played it safe and missed opportunities, or someone who took a calculated risk and discovered unexpected success. The listener draws their own conclusions from the story without feeling like you're trying to convince them of anything. The seed planting approach involves introducing an idea briefly and then letting it incubate in someone's mind before returning to it later. You might mention an interesting article you read, share a brief observation about a trend you've noticed, or pose a thought-provoking question, then change the subject. Days or weeks later, you can reference that seed and often find that the person has been thinking about it and is now more open to exploring it fully. This works because our brains continue processing information unconsciously long after a conversation ends. Ideas that seemed strange or challenging initially often become more familiar and acceptable over time, especially if they're not presented with pressure to accept them immediately. The assumption technique involves speaking as if a desired outcome is already agreed upon, without directly asking for agreement. Instead of asking, "Would you be willing to try this new approach?" you might say, "When we implement this new approach, what do you think will be the first sign that it's working?" The question assumes implementation while focusing attention on positive outcomes. Reframing is perhaps the most sophisticated form of subtle influence. It involves helping people see a situation from a different perspective without directly challenging their current viewpoint. If someone is focused on the risks of a decision, you might ask, what opportunities might we miss if we don't move forward? If they're dwelling on past failures, you might wonder, what did we learn that could help us succeed this time? The key to all these techniques is genuine respect for others' intelligence and autonomy. Subtle influence only works when it comes from a place of wanting to help others see possibilities they might not have considered, not from a desire to manipulate them into doing what you want regardless of their best interests. When you master subtle influence, conversations become collaborative explorations rather than persuasive battles. People feel heard, respected, and intelligent. They discover insights that serve both their interests and yours. They make decisions they feel good about and remain committed to over time. This is the difference between manipulation, which creates resistance and resentment, and true influence, which creates alignment and enthusiasm. The most ethical and effective persuasion happens when you help others discover what they actually want and need, then support them in achieving it. When your influence serves their genuine interests as well as your own, it doesn't feel like influence at all. It feels like collaboration, insight, and mutual discovery. This is the quiet power that transforms relationships, organizations, and lives. Chapter 8: How to Handle Resistance and Rejection Smoothly. Resistance is not your enemy. It's information. When someone pushes back against your ideas, disagrees with your perspective, or outright rejects your suggestions, they're giving you valuable insight into their fears, concerns, and unmet needs. Most people react to resistance with frustration, argument, or retreat. Master influencers see it as an opportunity to deepen understanding and build stronger connection. The moment you encounter resistance, everything changes. Your natural instinct might be to push harder, to present more evidence, to convince through logical argument. This instinct is almost always wrong. Resistance indicates that something in your approach has triggered a defensive response in the other person's nervous system. More pressure will only increase that defensive reaction. Instead of fighting resistance, you want to get curious about it. When someone says no, disagrees, or seems hesitant, the most powerful response is often a simple question: what makes you say that? Or help me understand your perspective on this. This immediately shifts the dynamic from confrontation to collaboration. You're not arguing with their position, you're seeking to understand it. This approach works because resistance usually comes from legitimate concerns that haven't been adequately addressed. Maybe they've tried something similar before and it failed. Maybe they're worried about unintended consequences you haven't considered. Maybe they have information about the situation that you lack. When you get curious instead of defensive, you often discover these underlying concerns and can address them directly. Let me share the story of Rachel, a consultant who learned this lesson the hard way. She was presenting a proposal to streamline operations for a manufacturing company. The operations manager, Jim, immediately began listing reasons why her suggestions wouldn't work. Rachel's first instinct was to counter each objection with data and examples from other companies. The more evidence she presented, the more resistant Jim became. Finally, Rachel stopped trying to convince and started trying to understand. She said, "Jim, you clearly have concerns about this approach. I'd really value hearing more about what worries you." Jim's entire demeanor changed. He explained that 3 years earlier, the company had tried a similar initiative that disrupted production and cost them their biggest client. His resistance wasn't about Rachel's proposal. It was about protecting the company from repeating a painful mistake. Once Rachel understood Jim's real concern, she could address it directly. She modified her proposal to include safeguards that would prevent the problems he'd experienced before. She acknowledged the validity of his concerns and showed how her approach was different from the previous failed attempt. Jim went from being her biggest opponent to her strongest advocate, because he felt heard and his expertise was valued. The feel-felt-found formula is a particularly effective way to handle objections without dismissing people's concerns. When someone expresses doubt or disagreement, you respond with something like, "I understand how you feel about this." Others I've worked with have felt the same way initially. What they found, though, was that when we addressed their specific concerns, the benefits far outweighed their initial worries. This formula works because it validates their feelings, shows they're not alone in having concerns, and opens the door to sharing how similar concerns have been successfully addressed in the past. You're not dismissing their objection. You're contextualizing it in a way that makes forward movement possible. Acknowledgement is crucial when dealing with resistance. Before you address any objection, you must first acknowledge that you've heard and understood it. You're absolutely right that this change would require additional training time initially, or that's a valid concern about how this might affect customer relationships. When people feel heard, their defensive stance begins to soften. Validation goes a step beyond acknowledgement. You're not just hearing their concern. You're recognizing that it makes sense given their experience and perspective. Given what happened with the last software implementation, I completely understand why you'd be cautious about this proposal. Or, that's exactly the kind of detail-oriented thinking that makes you so valuable to this team. The reframing technique helps people see their concerns from a different angle without dismissing them. If someone is worried about the time investment required for a new process, you might reframe it as an investment in future efficiency. If they're concerned about the risks of change, you might help them consider the risks of staying the same. Sometimes the most powerful response to resistance is agreement. When someone raises a valid concern or identifies a real problem with your suggestion, acknowledge it directly. You're absolutely right. I hadn't considered that aspect, and it could definitely be an issue. What do you think would address that concern? This approach turns potential opponents into collaborators, helping you improve your proposal. The redirect technique involves acknowledging someone's objection while gently steering the conversation toward solutions or common ground. I hear that you're concerned about the budget impact. That's important to consider. What if we could implement this in phases so the costs were spread out, and we could measure the ROI at each stage? When facing outright rejection, resist the urge to immediately present counterarguments. Instead, try to understand the deeper reasons behind the no. Often, what sounds like rejection of your idea is actually resistance to something else entirely. The timing, the process, their lack of involvement in the decision, or past negative experiences. The story approach can be powerful when dealing with resistance. Instead of arguing against someone's concerns, tell a story about how similar concerns were addressed in another situation. Stories feel less threatening than direct arguments and allow people to draw their own conclusions about possibilities they might not have considered. Emotional regulation is critical throughout this process. When people disagree with you, question your competence, or reject your suggestions, it's natural to feel defensive, frustrated, or hurt. These emotions will leak into your tone of voice, body language, and word choice, potentially escalating the conflict. Take deep breaths, stay curious rather than defensive, and remember that their resistance is about their concerns, not your worth as a person. Sometimes resistance indicates that you need to slow down and build more trust before proposing solutions. If people aren't ready to hear your ideas, pushing them won't help. Focus on understanding their situation more deeply, demonstrating your competence and care, and building the relationship foundation that makes influence possible. The most important thing to remember about resistance is that it's often a sign that people are taking your ideas seriously enough to engage with them. Apathy is much harder to overcome than active disagreement. When someone cares enough to argue with you, they're giving you an opportunity to address their concerns and build stronger alignment. Handling resistance gracefully is a skill that serves you far beyond individual conversations. It builds your reputation as someone who listens, adapts, and collaborates rather than someone who bulldozes through opposition. People become more willing to share honest feedback with you because they know you won't react defensively. They become more open to your future suggestions because they trust that you'll consider their perspective. The goal isn't to eliminate resistance entirely. The goal is to transform it from an obstacle into information, from conflict into collaboration, from a barrier to progress into a pathway to better solutions. When you can do this consistently, you become someone people seek out when they need to work through complex challenges and difficult decisions. Chapter 9. The Inner Game of Persuasion. Becoming the person they say yes to. All the techniques, strategies, and tactics in the world mean nothing if they're not grounded in genuine inner development. People don't say yes to your words. They say yes to who you are. They don't follow your arguments. They follow your energy. They don't trust your logic. They trust your character. The most important work of influence happens not in conversations with others, but in the quiet moments when you're developing yourself into someone worthy of trust and leadership. Your inner state broadcasts constantly through micro-expressions, energy, tonality, and presence that others feel even when they can't consciously identify what they're sensing. When you're anxious, people feel unsettled around you. When you're angry, they become defensive. When you're uncertain, they lose confidence in your direction. But when you're centered, clear, and aligned with your values, people naturally gravitate toward you and your ideas. This is why surface-level persuasion techniques often backfire. If you try to project confidence while feeling uncertain, people sense the incongruence and their trust diminishes. If you attempt to appear calm while internally feeling chaotic, your manufactured composure feels manipulative rather than reassuring. Authentic influence requires alignment between your inner reality and your outer expression. The foundation of this inner work is self-awareness. You must understand your own patterns, triggers, strengths, and limitations before you can effectively guide others. What situations make you defensive? What topics cause you to become emotional? What fears drive your need to control outcomes? When you're aware of these patterns, you can work with them rather than being unconsciously driven by them. The result was remarkable. His ideas began getting more serious consideration because he was no longer attached to them in a way that made others feel pressured to accept or reject them. People felt safe to explore his suggestions, ask questions, and build upon them collaboratively. Alex's influence grew not because he became more persuasive, but because he became more centered and less needy. Mirror neurons are specialized brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe others performing the same action. This neurological phenomenon means that people unconsciously mirror the emotional states of those around them. If you're calm, others feel calmer. If you're confident, others feel more confident. If you're anxious, others become anxious too. Your emotional state literally influences the emotional states of everyone you interact with. This is why working on your inner game is not selfish self-improvement. It's a service to everyone you encounter. When you develop genuine inner peace, confidence, and clarity, you create those same states in others simply by being present with them. Your centered energy becomes a gift that makes others feel better about themselves and more optimistic about possibilities. Daily practices are essential for developing and maintaining this inner alignment. Journaling helps you process experiences, identify patterns, and clarify your thoughts and feelings. Regular reflection allows you to learn from both successes and failures, continuously improving your understanding of yourself and others. Meditation or mindfulness practice develops your ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. This creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose how you react rather than being driven by unconscious patterns. Even 5 minutes of daily quiet reflection can significantly improve your presence and emotional regulation. Physical exercise affects your mental and emotional state in profound ways. Regular movement reduces stress hormones, increases confidence, and improves your overall energy level. The way you carry your body influences how you feel about yourself, which in turn affects how others perceive and respond to you. Continuous learning keeps your mind sharp and your perspectives fresh. Read books, attend seminars, engage in conversations with people who challenge your thinking. The more you know about human nature, psychology, communication, and your areas of expertise, the more valuable you become to others and the more confident you feel in your ability to contribute meaningfully. Integrity practice involves aligning your actions with your stated values consistently, even when it's difficult or costly. Every time you do what you said you would do, you build trust with others and confidence in yourself. Every time you compromise your values for short-term gain, you erode both your credibility with others and your self-respect. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistent growth and alignment. You don't need to become a saint to be influential. You do need to become someone who is genuinely committed to serving others' highest good as well as your own. You need to develop the inner strength to remain centered under pressure, the wisdom to see situations clearly, and the courage to act on your convictions. When you do this work consistently, something magical happens. Influence becomes effortless because it flows from who you are rather than what you do. People trust you because your integrity is evident. They follow your lead because your direction feels solid and reliable. They say yes to your suggestions because they sense that you genuinely care about their well-being. This is the quiet power that changes lives, builds extraordinary relationships, and creates lasting positive impact. It's not flashy or dramatic. It doesn't require manipulation or force. It simply requires becoming the kind of person that others naturally want to trust, follow, and support. When you commit to this inner development, you don't just become more persuasive. You become someone who makes the world a little bit better simply by being in it. Chapter 10: Persuasion in Real Life. Scripts, Scenarios, and Examples. Understanding principles is valuable, but mastering persuasion requires seeing how these concepts apply in specific, real-world situations. Every conversation has its own dynamics, constraints, and opportunities. The art lies not in following rigid scripts, but in adapting your approach to the unique circumstances while staying true to the fundamental principles of ethical influence. Let's explore how to apply everything you've learned in the situations where persuasion matters most, advancing your career, building relationships, creating change, and navigating daily interactions with grace and effectiveness. Asking for a raise is one of the most common and anxiety-provoking persuasion challenges people face. Most people approach this conversation poorly, focusing on their personal needs rather than their value to the organization. They say things like, "I've been here for 3 years and haven't had a raise," or "My rent has gone up and I need more money." These approaches make the conversation about your problems rather than your contributions. A more effective approach begins with research and preparation. Before the conversation, document your accomplishments, quantify your contributions to the organization, and research market rates for your position and experience level. Then frame the conversation around value rather than need. "I've been reflecting on my contributions this year, and I'd like to discuss my compensation. I've led 3 projects that saved the company over $200,000, trained 5 new team members who are now high performers, and received excellent feedback from clients who specifically requested to work with me again. Based on my research, professionals with my experience and track record typically earn between X and Y in our market. I believe my compensation should reflect the value I'm providing. I'd appreciate your thoughts on how we might address this." This approach demonstrates competence through specific accomplishments, shows warmth by focusing on organizational benefit rather than personal need, and maintains authenticity by being direct about your request while remaining open to dialogue. Selling without sounding sleazy requires shifting your focus from what you want to get to what you can give. People resist being sold to, but they're attracted to solutions that genuinely serve their interests. The key is to become genuinely curious about their situation before presenting any solutions. Instead of leading with your product or service, start with questions that help you understand their challenges, goals, and constraints. What's working well in your current situation? What would you change if you could? What would success look like for you? What concerns you most about making a change? Listen carefully to their responses, then present your solution as a natural response to what they've told you. Based on what you've shared about wanting to increase efficiency while maintaining quality, I think our approach could be a good fit. Here's how it addresses the specific concerns you mentioned. This consultative approach works because people feel heard and understood before being presented with options. They sense that you care about their success, not just your commission. Persuading family members and friends presents unique challenges because these relationships have long histories and established patterns. People may resist your influence simply because they remember when you were younger, less experienced, or made mistakes they haven't forgotten. Additionally, the stakes feel higher because these relationships matter more than business interactions. The key is to separate your ideas from your identity and their response from their relationship with you. If your suggestion gets rejected, it doesn't mean they don't value your opinion or care about your relationship. It might simply mean the timing isn't right, they have information you lack, or they need to process the idea differently. When trying to influence someone close to you, lead with empathy and respect for their autonomy. I care about you, and I've been thinking about your situation. I have some thoughts that might be helpful, but I want to make sure you're open to hearing them first. What would be most useful for you right now? Someone to listen, someone to brainstorm options with, or someone to offer a different perspective? This approach honors their right to choose how they want to be supported and makes your eventual suggestions feel collaborative rather than prescriptive. Getting someone to help or support you requires making it easy and meaningful for them to say yes. Most people want to help others, but they're often hesitant because they're not sure what's being asked of them or whether they can deliver what's needed. Be specific about what kind of help you need, how much time it would require, and what value they would provide. Instead of saying, "Could you help me with my project?" Try, "I'm working on a presentation about market trends, and I know you have expertise in this area. Would you be willing to spend 30 minutes reviewing my analysis and sharing your thoughts?" Your perspective would really strengthen the final product. This request works because it's specific, time-bounded, and shows how their expertise would be valuable. It makes helping feel like a meaningful contribution rather than a vague obligation. Negotiating better deals requires understanding that most negotiations aren't zero-sum games where one person wins and another loses. The best negotiations create value for both parties by finding creative solutions that address everyone's underlying interests. Before entering any negotiation, identify not just what you want, but why you want it. What interests does your position serve? Then try to understand the other party's underlying interests as well. Often, what seems like conflicting positions can be resolved when you understand the deeper needs driving each side. For example, if you're negotiating a deadline extension, don't just ask for more time. Understand why the original deadline was set and find ways to address those concerns while getting the time you need. I understand this project needs to be completed before the board meeting on the 15th. I can deliver the core analysis by then, but the detailed recommendations would be stronger with 3 additional days. Would it work to present the key findings on schedule and follow up with the detailed action plan by the 18th? Diffusing tense situations requires remaining calm when others are emotional and focusing on understanding rather than being understood. When someone is angry, frustrated, or upset, your first instinct might be to defend yourself, correct their misperceptions, or explain your position. Resist this impulse. Instead, focus entirely on understanding what they're experiencing and what they need. I can see you're really frustrated about this. Help me understand what's most concerning to you. Listen fully to their response, acknowledge their feelings, and work together to identify solutions. I understand why this situation would be frustrating. You expected X, and instead Y happened, which affected your ability to deliver for your client. That's completely understandable. What would need to happen for us to move forward productively? This approach de-escalates tension by making the other person feel heard and shifting focus from blame to solutions. The thread connecting all these scenarios is the fundamental principle that persuasion works best when it serves others' interests as well as your own. Whether you're asking for a raise, selling a product, influencing a loved one, requesting help, negotiating a deal, or resolving conflict, your influence will be most effective when people sense that you genuinely care about their well-being and success. These aren't just techniques to get what you want. They're ways of interacting that honor others' intelligence, respect their autonomy, and create outcomes that benefit everyone involved. When you approach persuasion from this foundation of genuine care and mutual benefit, you don't just become more successful at influencing others. You become someone who makes every interaction more positive and productive for everyone involved. Chapter 11: The Dark Side of Persuasion and Why You Must Stay Clean. With great power comes great responsibility, and the ability to influence others is no exception. Everything you've learned about human psychology, emotional triggers, and persuasive communication can be used for good or ill. The same techniques that can inspire positive change and create mutual benefit can also manipulate, deceive, and exploit others for selfish gain. Understanding the dark side of persuasion isn't about learning how to manipulate people. It's about recognizing manipulation when it's used against you and ensuring that your own influence remains ethical and beneficial. The line between persuasion and manipulation isn't always clear, but it's crucial that you understand the difference and consistently choose the higher path. The fundamental distinction lies in intent and outcome. Ethical persuasion seeks to create mutual benefit, honors others' autonomy, and respects their right to make informed decisions. Manipulation prioritizes the manipulator's interests over others' well-being, uses deception or emotional exploitation, and treats people as objects to be controlled rather than individuals to be served. Manipulation often involves creating artificial scarcity, fear, or urgency to pressure people into quick decisions. It exploits psychological vulnerabilities and triggers emotional responses that bypass rational thought. It withholds important information that might change someone's decision or deliberately misrepresents facts to serve the manipulator's agenda. Consider the difference between ethical and manipulative sales approaches. An ethical salesperson thoroughly understands their prospects' needs, presents solutions that genuinely address those needs, provides complete information about benefits and drawbacks, and supports whatever decision serves the customer's best interests, even if that means recommending a competitor's product. A manipulative salesperson focuses on closing deals regardless of customer benefit, creates false urgency or artificial scarcity, emphasizes emotional triggers over logical analysis, and withholds information that might lead to a different decision. They might say things like, "This price is only good today," when there's no real deadline, or "everyone else is buying this," when sales are actually slow. The manipulative approach might generate short-term results, but it creates long-term problems. Customers eventually realize they've been deceived, leading to refunds, complaints, damaged reputation, and lost future business. What seemed like successful persuasion reveals itself as destructive manipulation that ultimately serves no one's interests well. The karma of emotional influence is real and unavoidable. When you use your understanding of human psychology to serve others genuinely, you build trust, credibility, and lasting relationships that compound your positive impact over time. When you use that same understanding to exploit others, you create resistance, resentment, and a reputation that eventually destroys your ability to influence anyone. This isn't just about being morally superior or following abstract ethical principles. It's about recognizing that sustainable influence requires genuine trust and goodwill, which can only be built through consistently serving others' interests alongside your own. Manipulation might work in individual transactions, but it fails catastrophically in relationships that matter over time. Let me tell you about two managers with similar technical skills and ambitions. Robert believed that getting ahead required outmaneuvering others and manipulating situations to his advantage. He took credit for others' ideas, withheld important information from colleagues, and used people's insecurities against them to maintain control. His tactics worked initially, earning him promotions and recognition. Sarah, in contrast, built her influence by genuinely developing others and creating value for everyone around her. She shared credit generously, provided information that helped others succeed, and used her understanding of people to help them overcome their limitations rather than exploit them. Her progress seemed slower at first. Over time, however, the consequences of their different approaches became clear. Robert's manipulative behavior eventually caught up with him. People stopped trusting him with important information. They became reluctant to support his initiatives. When he needed help during a crisis, he found himself isolated and without allies. His career stagnated as his reputation for self-serving manipulation spread throughout the organization. Sarah's ethical approach created a network of people who trusted her judgment, valued her input, and actively supported her success. When opportunities arose, others recommended her. When she needed resources for important projects, people eagerly volunteered their assistance. Her influence grew exponentially because it was built on a foundation of genuine value creation and mutual benefit. Warning signs that you're being manipulated include feeling pressured to make quick decisions without adequate time to think, being presented with false choices or artificial urgency, having important information withheld or misrepresented, feeling emotionally manipulated through guilt, fear, or flattery that seems excessive, and sensing that someone is telling you what you want to hear rather than what you need to know. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong about a persuasive interaction. Manipulative people often target your emotions deliberately to bypass your rational analysis. If someone is pushing hard for a quick decision, insist on taking time to think. If claims seem too good to be true, demand evidence. If you feel pressured, step back and consider whether the pressure serves your interests or theirs. The most insidious form of manipulation is when people use genuine psychological principles in service of selfish ends. They might build rapport not to create genuine connection, but to lower your defenses. They might listen carefully not to understand your needs, but to find vulnerabilities they can exploit. They might tell stories not to illustrate helpful insights, but to manipulate your emotions in ways that serve their agenda. This is why developing your own emotional intelligence and self-awareness is so important. The more you understand your own psychological triggers, the less vulnerable you are to having them exploited by others. The more confident you are in your own worth and judgment, the less susceptible you are to manipulation through false flattery or manufactured scarcity. Staying clean in your own persuasive efforts requires constant self-examination and commitment to serving others' genuine interests. Before entering any situation where you want to influence someone, ask yourself, am I seeking an outcome that genuinely benefits this person as well as me? Am I being completely honest about the benefits and drawbacks of what I'm proposing? Am I respecting their right to say no without pressure or consequences? Would I be comfortable if they knew exactly what I was thinking and feeling about this interaction? If you can't answer these questions positively, step back and reconsider your approach. True persuasion doesn't require deception, pressure, or exploitation. It requires understanding, service, and genuine care for others' well-being. The most powerful protection against manipulation is developing your own center of inner certainty and values. When you know what you stand for and trust your own judgment, you're less likely to be swayed by external pressure or emotional manipulation. When you're secure in your own worth, you don't need others' approval badly enough to compromise your standards. Building this inner foundation requires consistent practice of self-reflection, value clarification, and boundary setting. Know what you will and won't accept in your relationships and interactions. Be willing to walk away from situations that require you to compromise your integrity or serve others who don't reciprocate respect and consideration. The long-term view is crucial here. Manipulation might seem to offer shortcuts to getting what you want, but it creates problems that compound over time. Ethical persuasion requires more patience and skill initially, but it builds the trust, credibility, and relationships that make future influence effortless and sustainable. Choose the harder path of authentic influence. Develop genuine competence rather than trying to fake expertise. Build real relationships rather than manufacturing rapport for tactical advantage. Create actual value rather than just manipulating perceptions. Tell the truth even when it's inconvenient. Honor others' autonomy even when pressure might work better in the short term. This commitment to ethical influence isn't just about being a good person, although it certainly is that. It's about recognizing that sustainable power comes from serving others genuinely, that lasting influence requires authentic trust, and that the most successful people are those who help others succeed alongside them. When you stay clean in your persuasive efforts, you don't just avoid the negative consequences of manipulation. You tap into the exponential power of genuine influence built on trust, competence, and care. You become someone people seek out for advice, support, and leadership. You create a legacy of positive impact that extends far beyond any individual transaction or interaction. The choice is always yours. You can use your understanding of human psychology to exploit others for short-term gain, or you can use it to serve others while achieving your own legitimate goals. The first path leads to isolation, resistance, and eventual failure. The second path leads to trust, influence, and lasting success that benefits everyone involved. Chapter 12: Persuasion as a Way of Life. Daily Habits to Sharpen Your Influence. Mastering the art of influence isn't about memorizing techniques or following scripts. It's about developing a way of being in the world that naturally attracts others to your ideas, vision, and leadership. This transformation happens through consistent daily practices that gradually reshape how you think, feel, and interact with others. Like physical fitness, influence is built through regular exercise of specific skills and mindsets. The most powerful people you know didn't become influential overnight. They developed habits and practices that consistently strengthen their ability to understand others, communicate effectively, and create positive change. These practices become so integrated into their daily routine that influence flows naturally from who they are rather than what they do. Morning mindset work sets the foundation for everything that follows. How you start each day determines the energy and presence you bring to every interaction. Begin each morning with 15 minutes of intentional preparation for the day ahead. This might include meditation to center yourself, visualization of positive interactions and outcomes, or journaling to clarify your priorities and intentions. During this morning practice, ask yourself key questions. What kind of energy do I want to bring to my interactions today? What opportunities do I have to serve others and create value? How can I be more present and attentive in my conversations? What patterns from yesterday can I improve today? This daily intention setting transforms random interactions into purposeful opportunities for positive influence. Approaching conversations with clear intention doesn't mean manipulating every interaction. It means being conscious about the impact you want to have and the value you want to create. Instead of going through conversations on autopilot, you become deliberately focused on understanding others, finding ways to help, and communicating in ways that serve everyone involved. Before important conversations, take a moment to set your intention. What outcome would serve everyone's best interests? How can you listen most effectively? What questions might help others think more clearly about their situation? This brief preparation dramatically improves the quality and effectiveness of your interactions. Studying human nature should become a daily habit, as natural as reading the news or checking email. Every person you encounter offers an opportunity to deepen your understanding of what motivates, inspires, and concerns people. Pay attention to what makes some people naturally charismatic while others struggle to be heard. Notice how different communication styles affect various personality types. Make it a game to observe and learn from every interaction. Watch how successful leaders handle disagreements. Notice what makes some presentations memorable while others are forgotten immediately. Pay attention to how certain people make you feel valued and understood, while others leave you feeling invisible or diminished. Keep a daily influence journal where you record insights about human behavior, effective communication techniques you observed, interactions that went particularly well or poorly, and patterns you're noticing in your own communication style. Review this journal regularly to identify trends and areas for improvement. In your journal, ask yourself questions like, what did I learn about this person's motivations and concerns? How could I have listened more effectively in that conversation? What approach would have been more persuasive in that situation? How did my energy and presence affect others today? What communication patterns am I developing that serve me well or hold me back? This daily reflection accelerates your learning by helping you extract insights from experience rather than just accumulating random interactions. You begin to see patterns in what works and what doesn't, gradually developing intuition about how to approach different people and situations effectively. Practicing empathy daily expands your ability to understand and connect with others. Make it a habit to genuinely consider other people's perspectives, especially when you disagree with them or find their behavior puzzling. Instead of immediately judging or dismissing others, get curious about what might be driving their actions or attitudes. When someone seems difficult or unreasonable, ask yourself, what might be causing them to act this way? What fears, pressures, or past experiences could be influencing their behavior? How might I respond if I were in their situation? This practice builds your capacity for understanding others even when their behavior doesn't immediately make sense to you. Reading regularly, particularly books about psychology, communication, leadership, and human behavior, provides the theoretical foundation for practical influence skills. But don't just read passively. Actively look for ways to apply what you're learning in your daily interactions. Test new approaches and observe the results. Physical practices that build presence and confidence contribute significantly to your influential capacity. Regular exercise improves your posture, energy level, and overall presence. Breathing exercises help you stay calm and centered during challenging conversations. Vocal exercises strengthen your speaking voice and improve your delivery. Practice speaking clearly and confidently in low-stakes situations so that when high-stakes conversations arise, effective communication feels natural rather than forced. Record yourself occasionally to hear how you actually sound rather than how you think you sound. Most people are surprised by the difference. Developing genuine curiosity about others transforms you from someone who talks at people to someone who connects with them. Make it a daily practice to ask at least one person a thoughtful question about their experience, perspective, or expertise. Not because you need anything from them, but because you're genuinely interested in understanding their world better. These questions might be as simple as, how did you get interested in this field? Or, what's been most surprising about this project? Or, what would you change about this process if you could? The key is asking with genuine curiosity rather than just making small talk or gathering information for your own purposes. Building and maintaining relationships requires consistent, small investments of time and attention. Remember personal details that people share with you and follow up on them later. Send brief messages to check in during difficult times. Share articles or resources that might interest specific people based on conversations you've had with them. These small gestures build the relationship foundation that makes influence possible. People are naturally more open to suggestions and guidance from someone they feel genuinely cares about them as a person, not just as a means to accomplish business objectives. Continuous skill development ensures that your influence grows rather than stagnates over time. Identify specific areas where you want to improve, whether it's public speaking, active listening, conflict resolution, or emotional intelligence. Seek out training opportunities, practice groups, or mentors who can help you develop these skills systematically. Join organizations like Toastmasters for public speaking practice. Attend workshops on communication and leadership, or work with a coach who can provide specific feedback on your interpersonal skills. The most influential people never stop learning and growing in their ability to connect with and inspire others. Conclusion: you don't have to be loud to be powerful. As we reach the end of this journey together, take a moment to reflect on who you're becoming. Not who you were when we started, but who you are right now, having absorbed these insights about human nature, influence, and authentic power. Something fundamental has shifted in your understanding of what it means to be truly influential in this world. You now understand that the most powerful people aren't the ones who shout the loudest or demand the most attention. They're the ones who listen most carefully, understand most deeply, and serve most genuinely. They're the quiet ones who make others feel heard, valued, and capable of greatness. They're the centered ones who remain calm in chaos and confident in uncertainty. This quiet power has been inside you all along. It was there in every conversation where you truly listened to someone's concerns. It was present every time you asked a thoughtful question that helped someone see their situation more clearly. It showed up whenever you made someone feel safe to be vulnerable, heard when they felt invisible, or capable when they felt inadequate. What you've learned isn't a collection of tricks or techniques to manipulate others into doing what you want. You've discovered timeless principles of human connection that honor both your needs and the needs of others. You've learned to see influence not as something you do to people, but as something you do with people in service of outcomes that benefit everyone involved. Every moment you enter a room, you are influencing the people around you. Your energy affects their energy. Your presence shapes their experience. Your words and actions ripple outward in ways you may never fully see or understand. The only question is whether you're doing this intentionally and skillfully or unconsciously and accidentally. You now have the awareness to choose. You can enter conversations with clear intention to understand and serve. You can speak with precision and listen with depth. You can respond to resistance with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You can build trust through competence, warmth, and authenticity. You can plant ideas subtly and handle rejection gracefully. More than specific techniques, you've developed a different way of seeing other people. Instead of opponents to defeat or obstacles to overcome, you see them as complex human beings with their own fears, hopes, needs, and dreams. You understand that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have, and your role is to help them discover their own wisdom and capacity rather than impose your will upon them. This perspective transforms every interaction from a potential battle into an opportunity for connection and mutual growth. It changes you from someone who tries to get what they want from others into someone who helps others get what they truly need while achieving your own legitimate goals in the process. The practices you've learned, from deep listening to subtle influence to ethical persuasion, aren't just communication skills. They're expressions of a fundamental respect for human dignity and intelligence. They reflect a belief that people are worthy of being understood, that their perspectives have value, and that the best solutions emerge when different viewpoints combine collaboratively. As you apply these insights in your daily life, remember that mastery comes through consistent practice, not perfect performance. There will be conversations where you forget to listen deeply, where you react defensively to resistance, where you push too hard or retreat too quickly. This is normal and expected. What matters is your commitment to continuous learning and growth. Each interaction offers a chance to practice these skills and refine your understanding. Every difficult conversation is an opportunity to strengthen your ability to remain centered under pressure. Every moment of resistance is a chance to get curious rather than defensive. Every success builds your confidence in the power of authentic influence. The world desperately needs what you now possess. In an age of artificial connection and manipulative communication, people are hungry for genuine understanding and authentic leadership. They're tired of being sold to, argued with, and manipulated. They're yearning for someone who truly sees them, hears them, and helps them discover their own path forward. You can be that person, not because you're perfect or have all the answers, but because you're committed to understanding others deeply and serving their genuine interests alongside your own. You can be the one who makes others feel valued and capable. You can be the voice of calm wisdom in chaos, the source of thoughtful questions that spark insight, the presence that makes difficult conversations feel safe and productive. This is your quiet power. Use it wisely. Use it generously. Use it in service of creating a world where people feel more heard, more understood, and more capable of achieving their dreams. Use it to build bridges instead of walls, to create solutions instead of arguments, to inspire growth instead of defensiveness. Start today. Start with the very next conversation you have. Listen a little more deeply. Speak a little more thoughtfully. Ask questions that show genuine interest and understanding. Look for ways to serve others' interests while pursuing your own. Notice the immediate difference this makes in how people respond to you and how you feel about your interactions. Remember that you already have everything you need to be powerfully influential. You don't need a louder voice, a more aggressive personality, or manipulative tactics. You need presence, competence, warmth, and authenticity. You need genuine curiosity about others and sincere desire to help them succeed. You need the patience to listen fully and the wisdom to speak truthfully. The quiet power of persuasion isn't about becoming someone different. It's about removing the barriers that prevent your natural wisdom and goodness from shining through. It's about letting go of the need to prove yourself and embracing the opportunity to serve others. It's about trading the exhausting effort to control outcomes for the sustainable satisfaction of creating value. When you master these principles, when you embody these practices, when you live from this foundation of authentic influence, something remarkable happens. People don't just say yes to your requests. They seek out your guidance, trust your judgment, and support your vision. Not because you've manipulated them, but because you've served them so well that helping you feels like helping themselves. This is the legacy of quiet power. Not dominance over others, but service to others. Not getting your way through force, but creating ways that serve everyone involved. Not winning arguments, but building understanding. Not demanding attention, but earning respect through consistent competence and care. You were never meant to be loud to be powerful. You were meant to be present, authentic, and genuinely caring. You were meant to listen deeply, speak thoughtfully, and act with integrity. You were meant to understand that true influence comes not from what you can get others to do for you, but from what you can inspire them to become for themselves. Begin now. The world is waiting for your quiet power. Use it well.